I remember the exact moment I realized I had built everything wrong. Not the companies, not the code, not the systems I'd spent years architecting with the obsessive precision of a man who genuinely believed that if he just optimized hard enough, long enough, relentlessly enough, he could engineer his way to something that finally felt like enough. No. All of that was technically correct. The execution was clean, the metrics were green, the trajectory was, by every external measure, extraordinary, but I was sitting in a room that cost more than most people earn in a decade, and I felt nothing, not sadness. Sadness would have been something to work with. Sadness has texture. Sadness has direction. Sadness at least means something inside you still cares enough to grieve. This was different. This was the particular silence that lives behind the noise when the noise finally stops. This was the feeling you get at the summit when you look down and realize the mountain you climbed wasn't the mountain you needed. This was the cold, clean, devastating clarity of a man who spent 20 years running and just turned around, breathing hard, and found no one there, not even himself. I want to talk to you about something they don't make content about, not really, not honestly. They'll talk about loneliness in the abstract, they'll give you statistics, they'll frame it as a productivity problem, get better sleep, practice gratitude, find your tribe, optimize your mornings, journal your feelings in a leather-bound notebook you bought specifically because successful people recommend leather-bound notebooks. I did all of it. I built systems for my emotional health the same way I built systems for everything else. Scheduled, tracked, reviewed quarterly, color-coded. You know what that is? That's not healing. That's performance. That's the most sophisticated avoidance mechanism a high-functioning person can construct, turning the interior life into another project, another dashboard, another thing to optimize so you never actually have to sit inside it. Here's what I learned. The hard way, the only way that ever actually sticks. You cannot engineer intimacy. You cannot optimize your way to being known. There is no system sophisticated enough, no framework elegant enough, no morning routine disciplined enough to substitute for the raw, terrifying, irreplaceable experience of being seen, fully seen, mess and all, by another person. And I didn't know that. Not in my bones. Not where it counts. Wait, before you scroll, I know you're thinking this isn't about you. I know you're watching this and nodding along with that comfortable distance of a person who believes the story is about someone else. Someone more extreme, someone more broken, someone whose version of this is more dramatic than yours. Don't deny it. Because here's the thing about high-achieving people, and I say this as someone who lived it from the inside. We are the best in the world at convincing ourselves we are fine. We have refined fine into an art form. We have made fine into a brand. We have scheduled fine into our calendars and tracked it in our journals and presented it to the world with such confident consistency that we eventually stopped questioning it ourselves. I was fine. I was so fine. I woke up at 5. I worked until 11. I answered emails on weekends. I read books about leadership and stoicism and the neuroscience of peak performance. I had strong opinions about nutrition and sleep architecture and the compounding returns of deliberate practice. I was a machine that had learned to speak, and the machine had no idea, genuinely, completely, devastatingly no idea, what it had sacrificed to run so cleanly. Tell me something. When was the last time someone asked you how you were and you told them the truth? Not the curated truth, not the acceptable truth. Not the truth that makes you seem relatable without actually costing you anything. The real truth. The truth that lives in the 3 a.m. space, in the quiet between accomplishments, in the hollow feeling that sometimes rises up in the middle of a perfectly good day, for no reason you can articulate, but every reason you're not ready to face. When was the last time you let someone see that? If you're like I was, you're already calculating how to answer that question in a way that sounds honest without being vulnerable. You're already preparing a response that gestures toward depth while maintaining control. That calculation is the cage. That calculation is the thing that keeps you permanently alone, even in rooms full of people, even in relationships, even in the ones that look from the outside like they're working. I built a version of myself for public consumption. I built it early. I built it well. I built it the way you build anything when you're young and afraid and you've learned through some combination of experience and observation and the particular cruelty of feeling too much in rooms that didn't know what to do with that the safest version of you is the useful version of you, the competent version, the performing version. The version that has answers, holds things together, doesn't need anything, doesn't ask for anything, doesn't break. I thought that was strength. I thought needing nothing was the ultimate form of self-sufficiency. I thought that if I could just become indispensable enough to enough people in enough contexts with enough demonstrated capability, then I would eventually feel secure. Here's what I learned. That's not self-sufficiency. That's the wound wearing a suit. That's the child who learned that love was conditional. Conditional on performance, on usefulness, on never being a burden. Growing up into an adult who has simply expanded the performance to a global scale, the applause gets louder, The emptiness keeps pace. Her name isn't important. Not for this. What's important is what she represented, which was something I had no category for. Something my entire architecture of self-protection was specifically designed to prevent. She wasn't extraordinary in the way I had been trained to recognize extraordinary. She wasn't optimizing anything. She wasn't building anything. She wasn't performing anything. She was just present. That's it. That's the whole thing. And if you're like I was, you're thinking, that sounds small. That sounds like the kind of thing people say when they don't have anything more interesting to offer. Presence. What does that even mean? It means she didn't need me to be impressive. It means when I walked into a room having had a catastrophic day, she didn't need me to reframe it as a learning experience before she would sit with me. She didn't need the lesson. She didn't need the redemption arc. She didn't need me to already be on the other side of it, cleaned up and narrativized and useful again. She just sat with me in it. Do you have any idea how disorienting that is to a person who has spent his entire adult life believing that love is something you earn? The first few months I kept waiting for the ask. I kept waiting for the moment the bill arrived. The moment she revealed what the presence had been building toward, what she was going to need from me in return, what the transaction actually was. Because everything I had ever experienced told me that intimacy is a transaction. That people who stay close are close because you're giving them something. Status, security, stimulation, entertainment, usefulness. That the warmth was always underneath a kind of negotiation. I was so defended I couldn't even receive care without immediately looking for the exit clause. She saw that she didn't call it out cruelly. She didn't make it a confrontation. She just reflected it back to me gently in the way you reflect something back to a person when you want them to see it, but you're not trying to wound them with it. She said, "You don't know how to just receive something, do you?" And I laughed. I laughed the way men laugh when someone has just said something so precisely accurate that the only available defense is to treat it as a joke. And she waited with this patience that had no performance in it. This patience that wasn't building toward anything, that wasn't waiting for me to transform or improve or respond correctly. She just waited. I want to talk about the fear of being known, really talk about it, because I think it's the central crisis of our time. And we dress it up in 1,000 different costumes. Busyness, ambition, productivity, stoicism, self-improvement, and we never name it directly. The fear of being known is the fear that if someone sees all of it, the insecurity beneath the confidence, the longing beneath the indifference, the grief beneath the forward momentum, the softness beneath the armor, they will leave, or worse, they will stay, but differently. They will stay with the knowledge, and the knowledge will change how they look at you, and the look will confirm what you have always, at some level, suspected about yourself, that the real you is less than the presented you, that the gap between who you appear to be and who you actually are is not a gap anyone would choose to step into if they saw it clearly. So you manage the gap. You manage it relentlessly. You manage it by always being the most prepared person in the room, the most reliable, the most together, the most capable of holding everything with apparent ease. You build the empire, and the empire is impressive, and people are impressed. And the impression feels briefly like being known, but it isn't. It's the opposite of being known. It's being seen, and being seen is not the same thing. Here's what I learned about the difference. Being seen is passive. Being seen is what happens when you stand in front of people and perform the version of yourself you've curated. Being seen means the image lands. People receive the image. They respond to the image. The image has power. Being known is terrifying. Being known means the image has been gently, persistently, lovingly removed, and what remains is still worth staying for. Being known means someone has sat with you long enough to hear the things you've never said out loud, to notice the patterns you've hidden even from yourself, to see the child inside the competence and not run from it. Being known is not comfortable. I want to be clear about that. It is not warm immediately. It is not soft. It is initially excruciating. Because the moment you begin to be known, you become aware of every place where you have betrayed yourself in the service of the image, every compromise, every moment of calculated authenticity, every time you told yourself the performance was necessary and wise rather than frightened. She kept showing up. That was the thing. That was the daily undramatic, devastating thing. She kept showing up. I built walls for 20 years, good walls, walls with aesthetic appeal, walls that looked like character rather than defense, walls that the people who admired me called things like discipline and focus and emotional intelligence. She didn't try to break through them. She just stood on the other side of them and refused to pretend they weren't there. She didn't perform closeness across the distance. She didn't accept the simulacrum of intimacy I was offering as though it were the real thing. She just waited. On the other side, present, patient, not with the patience of someone who believes she can fix you, with the patience of someone who understands that people open in their own time and that forcing it is just another form of violence. And slowly, Not dramatically, not in a single breakthrough moment that would make good cinema. Slowly, in the ordinary hours of ordinary days, in the small, honest moments that accumulate into something you don't have a word for until later, I started to let the walls come down. Not all at once. A sentence here, an admission there, a moment of not pretending I had it together when I didn't, small, almost invisible, the kind of thing that wouldn't impress anyone watching from outside. The most important work I have ever done. Look at me for a second. I'm going to say something and I need you to let it land without immediately categorizing it as applicable to someone else. The thing you are protecting is not protecting you. The version of yourself you have built, the one that handles everything, needs nothing, asks for nothing, performs indefinitely, maintains the image under every condition. That version is not the strong one. That version is exhausted. That version is standing in a room it has built with its own hands, surrounded by everything it was supposed to want, and feeling nothing, or worse, feeling everything and having no one safe to feel it with. That version is brilliant and capable and impressive and profoundly, quietly, corrosively lonely, and it has been for a long time. Don't deny it. The collapse, when it comes, it always comes in one form or another, because human beings are not machines, and the body keeps score, and the psyche has a long memory, and the thing you've been running from has been running at the same speed for the same duration, and eventually you are both in the same place. The collapse is not the disaster. I need you to hear this. The collapse is the mercy. The collapse is the moment the performance stops being sustainable, and you are finally too exhausted to maintain it. You are finally on the floor, literally or metaphorically, it doesn't matter. And you don't have the energy to stand up in the version that has been standing for 20 years. And in that space, in that empty, terrifying, wide open space, something can finally begin, not recover. Begin, because what came before wasn't the real life. It was the preparation. It was the holding pattern. It was the long, elaborate, sophisticated delay of the real life. The one that requires you to be present, known, connected, willing to receive, willing to need, willing to admit the full dimensions of your humanity rather than the curated highlights. The collapse is the invitation. Most of us decline it. We get up, reconstitute the performance, build the walls higher, run faster, produce more, achieve louder, until the next collapse. She taught me, not by teaching, but by being, how to accept the invitation. There is a specific kind of love I want to describe because I think it is the rarest thing in the world and the least understood and the one most worth fighting for, not because it feels good, though it does eventually, but because it is the only kind that actually reaches you. It is the kind of love that is not interested in the image, not dismissive of the image. She respected the things I had built, the discipline, the capability, the drive. She wasn't asking me to abandon any of that. She was asking me to stop using it as a hiding place. It is the kind of love that has no performance requirement attached to it, that doesn't shift in temperature based on whether you're winning or struggling. That is present for both and makes no hierarchy between them. It is the kind of love that tells you the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable, because it is more committed to your actual well-being than to your momentary comfort. It is the kind of love that doesn't need you to already be healed, that doesn't need you to arrive with the wound already closed and the lesson already integrated and the narrative already clean, that is willing to sit with you in the unresolved middle, that is one in a million, not because the people who offer it are extraordinary in some ineffable way, but because the conditions required to offer it are so demanding. So much patience, so much self-security, so much genuine care for another person's interior life, that most people, understandably, don't cultivate them. And finding someone who has, when you have spent your whole life defending against exactly this kind of intimacy, is the most disorienting and transformative and quietly miraculous experience available to a human being. I want to talk about the rebuilding, because the movies skip this part. The movies, the ones about transformation and redemption and the man who learns to love. They skip the ordinary, daily, unglamorous, deeply unsexy work of actually changing. It doesn't happen in a montage. It happens in a Tuesday afternoon when you have every justification to go back to work, check the metrics, to answer the messages, to be useful and productive and impressive. And instead you sit down, you are present, you ask a question and you wait for the full answer instead of processing it for useful information and moving on. You put the phone down not because someone made you, but because you have decided, slowly through incremental daily practice, through the repeated choice to value presence over output, that this matters more, not instead of the work, in addition to it, in right relationship with it. The work is real, the ambition is real, the drive to build things that matter is real and valid and not the enemy. The enemy was the substitution. The enemy was using the achievement to avoid the intimacy, using the productivity to avoid the presence, using the external building to avoid the internal reckoning. What I was building in those years of maximum output was an altar. The altar was to the version of myself that didn't need anyone, the version that had transcended ordinary human requirements for connection, for softness, for being seen, for rest, for help. I was worshiping at the altar of my own invulnerability. And the altar was a lie. Here's what I learned about the difference between an empire and a home. An empire is built to impress. An empire is designed to communicate scale, power, reach, significance. An empire says, look what I have made, look how far I have come. Look at the distance between where I started and where I stand. An empire is built for the outside. A home is built for one person to feel safe. That's it. That's the whole distinction. A home is built so that one person, one specific, particular, irreplaceable person, can arrive, set down everything they've been carrying, and breathe. I'd built an empire and called it a life, and she walked into it, and I watched her walk through the impressive rooms and the carefully curated spaces, and I saw, with a clarity I could not unfeel, that she was not impressed. Not in the way I needed. She appreciated it. She respected the work. But she was looking for the room that was real, and there was no such room, not yet. Building it was the most important project I have ever undertaken. It has no metrics. You cannot track it on a dashboard. There is no quarterly review. The returns are invisible by conventional measures and absolutely everything by the only measure that, in the end, actually matters. Wait, before you scroll, I know you have things to do. I know there is always something more immediately productive than sitting with this. I know the very fact that this is making you feel something is making part of you want to move towards something that doesn't, that impulse. The impulse to escape the feeling by immediately generating action is the exact thing I've been talking about. Just stay for a moment. I'm almost done. The foundation, we talk about foundations in the context of buildings, and it is the right metaphor, except we use it wrong. We say, build your foundation first. We mean establish discipline, establish habits, establish financial security, establish career positioning, establish the conditions under which life can then be lived. That's not the foundation. The foundation is the capacity to be known. The foundation is the willingness to let someone in, to be honest about what you actually feel rather than what is strategically advantageous to feel, to ask for help without treating it as a debt that must be immediately repaid, to receive care without cataloging it as leverage, to be, in the private hours of the private life, the same person you are in the public performance, or at least to be actively working toward that congruence rather than managing the gap. Build that first. Build it even when it's terrifying. Build it especially when it's terrifying. Lay those bricks one at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one moment of genuine presence at a time, one admission of uncertainty at a time, one act of receiving without immediate reciprocation at a time. Those are the bricks. They look small. They look like nothing from the outside. No one photographs these bricks. No one features them in profiles of successful people. No one lists them in the productivity content that gets 100 million views. They are the only bricks that hold. Everything else you build, the achievements, the capabilities, the contributions, the legacy, it all rests on these bricks. Without them, the empire is a beautiful ruin waiting to happen. Impressive at altitude, hollow at the core, vibrating with the particular frequency of a thing that has not been rooted in anything real. With them, even modest things last. Even ordinary things matter. Even quiet things. A conversation at the kitchen table, a hand held in the dark, a question asked and genuinely waited for. A moment of being present for someone who needed presence more than solutions. Even those things are enormous. More enormous in the final accounting than anything I built for the world to see. She stayed when I was not impressive. When I was not functional. When I was at the furthest distance from the version of myself I had spent 20 years maintaining. When I was confused and inconsistent and occasionally difficult and genuinely, visibly, undeniably in need. She stayed not because she didn't see it, she saw everything. Not because she needed me to be broken. Not because she had a savior complex or a renovation project or a psychological investment in my helplessness. She stayed because she had made a different kind of decision. The decision to be present to a person rather than to a performance. The decision that the man behind the machine was worth the time it would take for him to figure out that his loyalty, not the loyalty that stays because it's easy, not the loyalty that stays because the metrics are favorable, the loyalty that stays through the reconstruction because it understood from the beginning that the reconstruction was the point, that the person worth knowing was not the perfected presentation, but the living, struggling, reaching, occasionally falling, getting back up human being underneath it. 1 in a million, maybe less. I am not the same man. I want to be clear. I don't say that as an achievement. I don't say it to perform transformation for an audience that is waiting for the inspirational conclusion. I say it as a plain, factual observation about what it feels like to live in the same body after something real has shifted. It is quieter. That's the first thing. The internal noise, the constant calculation, the perpetual monitoring of the gap between actual and ideal, the relentless measurement of progress toward the next threshold. It is quieter, not silent. I am still who I am. The drive is there. The hunger to build things, to understand things, to contribute, to push beyond comfortable limits. All of that is intact. I would not trade it. But it is no longer the only voice. There is a voice now that is interested in what's here. Not what's next, not what's better, not what's achievable with the remaining available hours. What is here, present, already worthy of full attention. The conversation at the dinner table, the texture of an ordinary evening, the particular way a person who knows you completely still chooses to look at you. These things are enormous. These things are the actual life, not the infrastructure in which the life will eventually begin once the conditions are right and the achievements are sufficient and the performance has been adequately maintained. This is it. This is the life. And she helped me see it, not by telling me, by living it in front of me with such warmth and consistency and unhurried presence that eventually, slowly, the way stone is shaped by water over time, the shape of me changed. Tell me something. What is it that you're waiting to feel before you let someone in? Secure enough, successful enough, sorted enough, healed enough, established enough, strong enough? I need you to hear me. The threshold you are waiting for doesn't exist. There is no version of you that will arrive fully formed and ready to be known without risk. There is no condition under which the vulnerability doesn't cost something. There's no achievement, no level, no status that will finally make it safe enough to be real with another person. The risk is the thing. The risk is not the obstacle between you and the intimacy. The risk is the intimacy, the willingness to be seen anyway before you're ready, before you've resolved it all, before you've reached the version of yourself that you've decided would be worth knowing. That willingness is the love itself, not the precondition, not the warm-up, the thing, don't deny it. You have built something impressive, maybe in the external visible sense, career, capability, reputation, the metrics of a life well managed, or maybe just internally, the ability to handle everything, to hold it together, to present the version that functions, to give the performance on demand. And it is genuinely impressive. I am not dismissing it. But beneath it, where you don't let people go, where even the closest people in your life have never quite reached, where the full truth of you lives, the uncertainty, the longing, the grief that doesn't have a clear object, the love you've wanted to give and haven't known how, the fear that being fully known would result in being fully left. That place has been waiting, not for the right achievement, not for the right credential, not for the performance to finally reach the standard where the real you can safely emerge for the right person, and possibly, for the decision to become the kind of person who can receive what the right person is offering. That is the work. That is the most important work. She is still here. That is the sentence that stops me every time. Not because of its complexity. It has no complexity. Because of its weight. Because of what is contained in those 4 words. For a person who spent 20 years constructing elaborate architecture specifically designed to ensure that no one would ever see enough of the real thing to make an informed decision to leave or stay. She sees it all. She made the informed decision. She stays. Not because I have finally optimized my way to deserving it. Not because I have finally achieved the threshold at which love is an appropriate return on investment. But because she decided, freely, clearly, with full information, that the person I actually am is the person she actually wants to know. That is what I want for you. Not the version I had, the particular geography of my particular story, but the experience itself, the experience of being known by someone who stays anyway, the experience of a love that is not conditional on the performance, the experience of arriving home, not to a building, not to a space, not to a status, but to a person who makes the word mean what it was always supposed to mean, safe, known, seen, stayed for. Here is my challenge to you, not an assignment, not a productivity hack, not a system to implement and track and review, a challenge, tonight, not tomorrow, not after the next milestone, not when things settle down tonight. Let someone in a little further than you have before, not all the way. You don't have to demolish the walls. That's not bravery, that's chaos. But a brick, remove one brick, say one thing you mean, ask for one thing you need, admit one uncertainty you've been managing alone. Receive one act of care without immediately calculating the debt. One brick. That is how the home is built. Not in a dramatic gesture of surrender. Not in a single transformative scene, but in the daily, ordinary, courageous choice to be slightly more real than yesterday, brick by brick, until one day you look up and realize that the walls have come down in the most remarkable way. Not by assault, not by collapse, but by the gentle accumulation of ordinary, honest moments. And where the walls were, there is something so much more worth having. There is a life. Your actual life with your actual self in it, and someone beside you who chose it knowing exactly what they were choosing. That's 1 in a million. That's everything. Don't wait.